This is a video guide I'm making for this guide here I made on Steam. I'm doing this because it's a bit complicated. There's a lot here to it, and part way through I realized there was a little bit of a mistake that I had made. So overall, this should just make the entire process quicker and hopefully easier to follow. I'm going to put links to all of this stuff in the description, but the first thing that you're gonna want to go to is the X56 user manual. If you're not using an X56, it isn't going to work quite the same. Good luck. That link should link you to this. This is going to give you a lot of important information that I may forget to give you. It will help you along the process of installing the software for it, as well as setting it up. But I will be covering that in the video as well. Now, to start things off, there's going to be a few things that you're going to need to download and set up. You're going to need XOutput, which is going to itself need DirectX, ViGEmBus, if I'm pronouncing that right, .NET, and Visual Studio Redistributables. I recommend doing the XOutput download last because it needs all of this first, so you're going to want to go to each of these links. For DirectX, it should just take you here. You should be able to hit the download button. And once you've downloaded it, you will have an exe. You're going to double click this exe, which I'm not going to do because I've already installed this, and it's going to run you through the setup. It's self-explanatory. The next link will do ViGEmBus, if I am pronouncing that right. On this GitHub here, you will see an exe download. I'm going to click that, download it, and you're going to end up with an exe. Same thing as before, you're going to double click it. I'm not going to do that because I've already installed this. You're going to run through its little wizard thing. It's pretty self-explanatory, and that's that. We are going to repeat this exact same process for .NET and click on the link. It'll take you to a very similar website as the DirectX one. This may be a little bit different if XOutput has updated. You can choose to download the old one that I've linked, or if it's updated, you know what you're doing, you can feel free to download the new one, but it will require a different version of .NET. That link will actually be in the guide, but I'm not going to put it in this YouTube video. For our purposes, for the XOutput that we're going to download, we will need this .NET. Download, same process as before. And then once it's downloaded, you're going to have an exe. Ignoring these two, this is the exe that you should have just downloaded. Once you run it, it's going to look a little something like this. It will run you through the setup and whatnot. I've already installed it, so it won't show up for me, but you are going to, at the very end, it will very likely prompt you to restart your computer. That is necessary and something you will have to do. The next thing that we're going to want to download is going to be the Visual Studio Redistributables. You're going to click on this link. And you're going to scroll down a little bit. Notice that there's 3 different options. You're probably going to be downloading this option, but in order to figure out which one you actually need to download, you're going to need to go to your Windows settings, go to System, at this bottom over here, go to About. Under System Type, you're going to see a 64-bit or 32-bit, and this X64, or it may be X86. Keep these in mind. If you have X86, it's going to be this. If you have X64, it's going to be this. Of course, you're going to click on it, you're going to download it, and same as before, you are going to get an exe file. You're going to double click it, agree to terms and conditions, and install. And like before, it is going to prompt you to restart your computer. This will be necessary. It is entirely optional to wait for a little bit before restarting your computer, but things won't work if you don't. Now we get to download all of the things that actually make things work. We're going to want to download XOutput, and if you haven't already, the X56 software. For the X56 software, you are going to get a bunch of options. You can scroll through each of these, which unfortunately you can't see all at once, and you'll notice that this was last updated in 2017, and this was last updated in 2018, so this is going to be the newest one. You'll also notice that there is a 32-bit and a 64-bit one. You remember those numbers that you found earlier in your settings, which I don't have up anymore? You are going to want to choose whichever bit that your operating system was, whether it was 32 or 64. In my case, it's 64, so I'm going to download this. I'm going to get an exe. I'm going to run this exe. I personally did not tick this box and did tick this box. It's going to go through a short process, and it's going to tell me I need to plug in my hands-on throttle and stick. This is where you will do that. I paused the video and plugged my hands-on throttle and stick in. Now it's in the way of everything. Hit next. Yay! And last but not least, we are going to need to download XOutput. Link here. This one isn't going to be quite as simple as just downloading and running an exe. This should link you to the X.3 branch. Find it, where is it? Here. This X.4 may no longer be under development and may be released, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Up at the top, you're going to see this code button. You're going to click it, you're going to find download zip, and you're going to click that. Once that's done, you're going to get this, not an exe. On Windows, I believe by default, you should be able to double-click this, and you will find an actual exe. This is not a setup, this is just the whole application right here. You can right-click it and hit copy, or you can hold Control while this is selected and hit the C key. Both of these do the same thing. You can then go to anywhere you want. For me, I just put it in the same place that I have the zip, and either hold Control and hit V, or you can right-click and paste. This will put the exe here. From here, I highly recommend you take and make a shortcut of it because it would suck to have to come here every time. And then you might want to set this somewhere on your background. Background isn't working. Well, pretend I put this on my desktop. Now is when we get to really set things up. In the guide, I put setting up the X56 software before setting up XOutput, and this was before doing proper testing and realizing that there was a little bit of a bug. So as it turns out, whenever you're holding in on any controller inputs, if you try to hold any keyboard key, instead of holding it, it will sit there and spam it, and things will be very jittery. And anytime you try to navigate a menu, it will very quickly spam through that menu. To combat this, we are going to want to put as many of the buttons on our hands-on throttle and stick and map them to a controller button as possible, which is going to be much easier if we start with the XOutput section of this guide. So you had this at xoutput.exe, and you probably made a shortcut for it. That shortcut is just going to make opening this easier, and you're going to want to do that every time you want to play the game after you close it down. You're going to open it, and it's going to look something like this. Now, just real quick, you can go to Tools and Settings, and you can choose to have this run at Windows Startup. This can be problematic though, because of something that we will discuss later. It's entirely up to you if you want to do this. Now, before we get into much more of this, we are going to want to make sure that No Man's Sky is closed. Oh, I'm having some issues. There we go. We want to add a controller, and we're going to want to start the controller. This is effectively turning on a virtual controller, and stopping is going to be turning off this virtual controller. Don't forget to constantly save everything you do. Now you're going to want to open No Man's Sky. So you can go to Options, go to Controls. Now you'll notice that this says mouse because you're probably using a mouse and keyboard. If you happen to have a controller, which is the ideal situation, it will instead say, give me 1 second, let me turn my controller on, turn this off. Anyways, you'll notice that the sensitivity settings say controller. That will be important for a later step, but isn't necessary right this second. Okie dokie, I have no idea what happened there. For me to fix it, fix that. I went and stopped and restarted this. As long as this is started when you open No Man's Sky, you can stop it to edit it and restart it without too many issues. Anyways, from within this controls menu, which was here, go to Remap Controls. You're going to notice this little button here, Configure Gamepad via Steam. This is going to open up a menu which opened up on my other screen, which is going to give you this. I actually also have a PlayStation 5 controller connected. You're going to want to make sure that you have this Xbox 360 controller connected. This is only going to show up as long as this is started. While this is open, you do not want to stop this. It'll break things. Anyways, you're going to want to make sure that you're starting off with just basic configuration. You're going to hit Edit Layout, and you're going to notice this. I realize it does look kind of confusing. You don't have to change any of this, but you absolutely can if you want to. Since you're going to be using your hands-on throttle and stick for flying and not menuing, at least for the most part, you're going to want to click this button until you find the flight control section. You can feel free to change the A key from fire weapons to do whatever you want. There's more things that just not letting me scroll down. Wonderful. There we go. The screen does not like me. Anyways, there are plenty of options here. You can make your A key toggle autopilot. Whatever you want. I'm going to keep this as fire weapons. The B key is going to be both boost and back. Personally, I don't want that to do that. I just want the B key to boost. So I can right-click this, remove the command, and then while this is empty, I can just delete this sub-command. So if I can find one. I'm not seeing one, but there are different things you can do here. These sub-commands mean that when you press the X key, it will try to land the ship. If it can't, it will then do these various things. It will, if you have it the settings set to toggle, it will combat autopilot. It will tag the marker, or it will exit the ship if landing ship is not available. You can also, instead of adding a subcommand, you can right-click and add an extra command and do whatever you want. In this particular case, whenever I hit B, it will both boost and go to the quick menu, instead of only going to the quick menu if boost is not an available thing to do. If you accidentally add something wrong and you don't want it, you can always just remove it and then delete the extra thing. You're going to want to set this up however you want it. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I know you can't see it because this menu is kind of dumb, but 7, 8 buttons here, as well as 9, 10, 11, 12 buttons here. You've also got the clicking on your joysticks, which also count as buttons. pushing you up to 14 total buttons that you can use to do whatever you wish. The triggers, while you can use them as buttons, they will be thrust and brake, which are axes. You can have variable thrust, which would be the entire point of using your throttle, which has variable thrust. You don't have to use variable brake, you can assign that to a button instead of an axis, but we'll get into that later. So I've adjusted some things. I've got it set so that one button is going to fire my weapons. One button, which I'm actually going to set as 2 buttons, are going to boost. I'll explain that later. Landing the ship is going to be set to 1 button, but when landing ship isn't available, it will try to exit ship, it will tag the marker, and that's it. Swapping weapons is going to be set to 1 button. Rolling left and right, this is still important, even though we are going to have rolling left and right set to our joystick. This is a bit necessary for the whole pulse drive thing. Combat autopilot toggling is going to be set to 1 button, and the pause menu also set to 1 button. The D-pad, I have cycling the ship's power, closest target, previous target, next target. And for the little clicky bits here, we can scan and zoom in. Also, I just realized something. I changed the A key to be the quick menu key. We're going to use left clicking to fire the weapons because it doesn't really matter if that gets spammed really quickly. Now that this is set up, you're going to want to remember this. Take a picture, take a screenshot, write it down. It will be kind of important. It is also worth noting that instead of using roll left and pulse drive and roll right and pulse drive, you can click this and click pulse engine instead, and that will achieve the rolling left and right holding both of those buttons. It'll only be 1 button, and that will free up a button. However, the way I'm going to do it just feels really cool to hit 2 buttons to activate pulse drive. The 3 important commands that I haven't put to any of these buttons are going to be fire weapons, scan, and the inventory button. Actually, ignore that thing. I do actually have scanning here, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that to be, where is it? Inventory. Perfect. Okay, so right here my voice cut out. The rest of this is going to be dubbed. From this point, we are going to want to stop the controller. Click on this little edit button here, and it will bring up this menu. From here, we're going to have a few axes. The LX and LY axes are going to be the left joystick on an Xbox 360 controller. The X-axis is going to be the horizontal plane, moving it left and right, and the Y-axis is going to be vertical, moving it up and down. The RX and RY are going to be the exact same things, but for the right stick on the Xbox 360 controller. LT and RT are going to be those 2 triggers on the bottom. Those aren't buttons, but they are actually their own axes. They can be set, if you don't want them to be an axis, such as braking using only a button, they can be set to be a single button rather than an axis. The rest of the things, the D-pad and the buttons, are, as you might guess, buttons. From here, what we're going to want to do is click on whichever button you want to assign on the controller, such as the D-pad up, and then you're going to want to set that. Click whatever button you want on your joystick. In my case, I have a little castle-looking thing on this joystick. Whenever I push that up, it ends up being button 11 here. That also makes the D-pad up button activate. For down, I can click this little castle thing down, that's button 13. For left, I can click it to the left. And for right, I can click it to the right. Now, we're going to want to take that note that we had, where each button, A, B, X, Y, and whatever else, are certain actions. We're going to want to take whatever button we want to perform that action on the throttle and stick, and apply it to the button that performs that action on the Xbox 360 controller. Button 6, which is whatever button I wanted that to be, is going to activate X, button 2 is Y, and just configure and click whatever button you want to activate that particular key. You may notice here that I have button B set to nothing. Button B I had set to boost, and I want 2 buttons to boost. So instead of setting one particular joystick button to be boost, I'm going to set an unused keyboard key. In this case, I'm going to do the O key. Now, this is where things can get a little bit tricky. You remember that thing where you can have this XOutput set to open with Windows. When you do that, XOutput is going to open with Windows. And if you have a keyboard key set here, anytime you hit that keyboard key, it's going to trigger the button related. In this particular case, as long as I have this quote-unquote Xbox 360 controller emulated and started in this application, if it opens up with Windows, every time I hit the O key, it will hit the B key, which will back out of whatever menu I'm in. This isn't optimal, so because I want two buttons to activate my throttle, I'm going to have to start this up every time I want to play. And I'll have to do the same with the X-56 software. I'll have to start that up and apply the profile every time I want to play after shutting it down. It's a little tedious, but it has to be done. From here, we're going to start messing with the axes. Right trigger is going to be the throttle. You can set this up however you wish. If you'd like, you can set it so that if you were to have played this in VR, you might notice that there's a little virtual throttle there. When that throttle is set to the center position, the ship has no braking and no throttling. Well, thrust, I guess I should say. You can set that up to be the same way on this on your throttle. I don't particularly prefer it to be like that, but if that's how you want it, you can. To do this, you're going to want to decouple your two throttles. You're probably going to want to take your right throttle. In order to configure the thrust, you're going to want to move it all the way forward, and then you're going to want to slowly pull it back until its minimum value is set to 50. Next, you're going to want to pull your right throttle all the way back, configure your left trigger, which is your brake by default, and then push it forward until the maximum value reaches 50. With it set the way it is, you are probably going to need to invert the braking. If you notice on the right here, this L2 bar is full, which would mean full braking, even though I've got my throttle set forward. If I invert this, you'll notice that the braking goes down. If you have green in both of these bars, one of your two things needs to be inverted. As long as everything is set properly, as you move your throttle forward and back, one bar should lower, and then once you move past that 50% mark, the next bar should start to fill up. It is also possible to set a sort of dead zone here. If you want to set a 10% dead zone, start at the 100% position, and instead of moving it back to the 50%, you'll move it back to 55%, leaving 5% of your dead zone on the throttle side. Do the same, move your throttle all the way back, and then configure the brake, move it forward to the 45%, leaving that other 5% of the dead zone on the braking side, and now you can have a bit bigger of a section where you can rest your throttle with it not messing with the ship. Well, I guess messing with its speed. If you want this to, for instance, be 25% instead of 50%, you will have to make sure that you save configuration with this button here on the bottom. You will want to close XOutput. The place where the XOutput.exe file is, you will see a settings.json file. From here, if you scroll down, you will see the L2 and R2 mappings. If you notice, it says 55 and 45 on the two right now, on the two minimums. You can set that instead to, for instance, 20 and 30 on the minimums, so that it starts from 0 to 20% as your braking, from 20 to 30% is your dead zone, and from 30 to 100% is going to be throttle. make sure you save this file, and then you're good to open up XOutput. Now you'll notice that the changes have been applied. Don't forget to save your configuration. But personally, I don't really like to do it like this. The way I'm going to do it is my throttle at the far back is going to be set far back. That is going to be 0, and the furthest forward position is going to be 100%. And my braking, I'm going to set to that little rotary dial that sits upside down, and as I push my thumb forward, that is going to brake. From here, we're going to want to start setting the yaw and the pitch axes. LX, the moving left and right of the left stick, is going to yaw the ship. The moving up and down of the left stick is going to pitch or move the nose up and down. Configuring LX, we're going to twist our joystick left and right. That will cause in-game twisting our stick left and right to yaw the aircraft, which is going to move the nose left and right. Configuring LY, we're going to take and move our joystick forward and then back. That is going to mean that whenever we move our joystick in-game forward and back, it is going to push the nose up and down. Now you'll notice that whenever I move the joystick forward, the LX axis gets pushed up. This means that in-game, whenever I push my joystick forward, the nose is going to go up instead of down. It is very, very likely that you are going to want to have that be the other way around. You should invert it here. You can invert it in the game settings, but I recommend doing it here. Don't forget to save configuration, and then we can start this controller. Go back in game, and we should be able to test everything. It would seem as though my mic cut out again. I do apologize if this video is choppy. It also seems as though OBS decided just to not record my gameplay for some reason. I'll overlay a little bit on in editing, but just ignore that part. It never happened. Speaking of things that never happened, whenever you downloaded your X-56 software, it should have created a shortcut. If it didn't, by default, you should be able to find the application. If you go open up a file explorer, go to this PC, go to Program Files, under Logitech, go to X56, and you should find HUD.exe. From there, you can create a shortcut, and it will be placed on the desktop. I'm not going to do that because I already have one. You are going to want to open this application, and it should end up looking like this. First thing we're going to want to do is go to the programming section. Most of my buttons are going to be programmed on my stick, so I'm going to click the button that looks like a stick. Or, well, I guess it looks like the top of it. From here, we can either click on the trigger in the little image, or just click in the box. I personally want my trigger to fire my weapons, and firing the weapons by default is left click. So what I'm going to want to do, now that I've clicked inside of this little field, I'm going to want to click the little button on the bottom that allows me to register mouse inputs, left click, and then click it again to turn that off. I'm going to want to name it left click, and now when I press the trigger, it will left click. I'm going to save this profile as its own separate profile. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can make it the default one, but I'm going to do it the different way. Well, once the profile is saved as its own profile, you'll want to click this little blue button up at the top that sort of looks like a crosshair on it. That will apply the profile to the stick and throttle, and then click this little gear icon up here. Whenever you do this, you'll notice that when you click your trigger down, it will say left mouse click down, and when you click it up, it'll say mouse click up. This will happen the exact same if you click your actual mouse button down. And now I want my little button, it's hard to see here, turns out to be the D button. You can click it in the physical button to have it highlight. And I want that to scan. Now, my scanning in the game is going to be the Q key. I accidentally hit the Shift key here. I can left click, then right click it, and hit delete to get rid of that part. I'm going to confirm it and name it Q. I am going to make sure to save and apply this profile, and then when I go back to this test menu, I can click and hold, and it seems to work just fine. Now, for getting the rolling to work, you're going to want to find the X-axis, right-click it, and click on bands. From here you'll notice, as you move your stick along the X-axis, it will start in this middle little band. As you move it to the left, it'll move to the top band, and as you move it to the right, it'll move to the bottom band. We are going to use this to the extreme, and this is how we're going to roll smoothly. Technically, it's not smoothly, but it's almost smooth and you aren't going to notice. Now, you're going to want to click the Edit Bands button. Whenever your mouse looks like this little black line with two arrows, you're going to want to click in between bands and add a bunch of them. I personally added 17 in total. That leaves one band in the middle to act as a dead zone, and 8 bands on either side. Once you've got however many you want, the more the merrier, but that makes it much harder to work with. Up at the top left, there's a little button to space these bands evenly. Once these bands are spaced evenly, you can move your stick, and you'll notice that it will move between the bands. This is the core concept of how you are going to be rolling your ship. On the most extreme bands, the top and bottom, you'll notice as you move your stick to the left, the far left, it'll move up to the 0% band. Left is A, rolling left, by default in No Man's Sky, so we're going to set that to the A key. The bottom band, which is the far right movement, we're going to set to the D key, as that is rolling right. Now, the band just underneath of that, just underneath the A band, I should mention, is going to activate 7/8 in my case, because I have 8 bands on 1/2. The A key is going to be pressed down for 7/8 of the time. For us to achieve this, we're going to want to right-click on that band and make a new advanced command. We're going to want to name it A 7/8. In the repeat section, we're going to want to click and then tap the A key. You're going to want to left click on that first little A key bit, right click, click set delay, and this is where things get a little bit complicated to explain. We are going to want to set some amount of time aside for this whole process to run. In my case, I'm going to make it 0.16 seconds. Ideally, you want this to be divisible by half of the number of bands that you have, the number of bands in 1/2 of your movement. In my case is 8, which is evenly divisible into 16. Now, this first delay is going to be how long the A key is up during this time. We are going to want it to be up for 1/8 of the amount of time that we have allotted, and 1/8 of 16 is going to be 0.02. Something I've noticed while testing is that the game doesn't really like to respond to any inputs that are shorter than 0.02 seconds. So you're going to want to try and keep any inputs that you have, any of these delays, longer than that, or equal to. The second delay, left click, then right click, we are going to want to be 7/8 of our time allotment. In this case, it's going to be 0.14 seconds. The end result should say 0.02 and 0.16, at least for us. This is because the 0.16 is how long this cycle takes to repeat, even though the delay is actually 0.14 on that particular slot. we're going to want to move to the command below it, add a new command, name it A6/8, and do the exact same thing, except we're going to want this key to be held up 2/8 of the time, or 1/4, which in this case is going to be 0.04. And we're going to want it to be held down 6/8, or 3/4 of the time, which is going to be 0.12 seconds. Next, we're going to move to the 5/8 section, name it A5/8. Make sure to tap the A key, set the delay, and this time 3/8 of the amount of time, which is going to be 0.06. And you may have noticed a pattern here. Every time we go down an eighth, we're just adding 0.02 to the delay that it is up and subtracting 0.02 from the delay that it is down. If at any point you happen to accidentally create a command in any of these bands, you can right-click on that band, set it to do nothing, and then make sure to right-click somewhere, click Delete Unused Commands, click on the commands. You'll have to use Shift to select multiple, and then delete selected commands. This will clear things up. Continue the process for 4/8, 3/8, 2/8, and 1/8. And as an editor's note, this is me adding in that Deadzone band that I forgot to add in the first time. We don't talk about that. The delays for all of these, A7/8 should be 0.02 and 0.14. For 6/8 should be 0.4 and 0.12. For 5/8, 0.06 and 0.1. Ignore that, 0.1. 3/8 should be 0.1 and 0.6. 4/8 should be 0.08 and 0.08. 2/8 should be 0.12 and 0.04. A1/8 is going to be up for 0.14 seconds and down for 0.02 seconds. Now that we have this done, we are going to start on the D side of things. If we're starting nearest the Deadzone band, we're going to want to make a new command. Name it D1/8, click D, set delay, and do the same thing we did for the A side, but for the D side. We're going to want this one to be up for 0.14 seconds and down for 0.02 seconds. And you're more or less going to repeat this and mirror the A side all the way down for the D side. Once this is done, you should be able to make sure you save, make sure you apply, and you go to the testing. You'll notice if you move your stick all the way to one side, it'll hold a key down, and then anywhere that isn't holding it all the way off to the side, you'll notice that at the exact same rate, it will be tapping either D or A, depending on which way you have tilted your stick. What is actually changing as you're moving your stick further left and right is during that exact same amount of time that it's repeating, the key, A or D, is being held down for a longer percentage of that time. Now, you'll notice that if you move your stick a little bit, you'll get to the 1/8 section, and then a tiny bit more, and you're already going to be at the 2/8 section, which is double what you were just at. And then, for you to double it again, instead of moving just one band, you have to move 2 bands. But for you to move that again, instead of moving just one, you have to move the entire rest of the distance all the way across. This can be adjusted by going over to Settings and setting the settings for your joystick. From within this menu, you can set a deadband and curvature. Now, by the S, you're going to see a kind of an S-looking curve, and that curve is already going to be pretty good. Although under the curvature section, I prefer it to be 750 instead of 8, but that is just me. You can set a deadband, and what that's going to do is, if you notice, as you move your stick to the left and to the right with its noticeably sized deadband, once it loads, A large section of moving to the left and to the right is going to do nothing until it hits the edge of that deadband. And that's really there just in case your stick doesn't sit perfectly up. Now, setting this curve, if you have it set where it's more shallow close to the center and steeper close to the edge, you are going to go over and I'm going to move my stick at the exact same speed. You'll notice that closer to the center, it moves slower across the bands, and closer to the edge, it moves quicker across the bands. This is going to allow you to make very fine adjustments whenever you are moving your stick just a little bit, and then whenever you want to roll quickly, you can move your stick pretty far over, and it's already going to be rolling pretty quickly. You can invert this if you want, where it is very steep near the center and very shallow near the edges. Doing it this way is you're going to move your stick a tiny bit, and you're already going to have covered several of the bands. This is going to make it almost impossible to make fine movements. However, you are going to be able to quickly rotate your ship without having to move your stick very far. And it's situational. You can decide to do it however you like. Don't forget to apply. You can do the same thing to the y-axis. It's entirely up to you if you want to, and the y-axis is going to affect moving the nose of the ship up and down. The rudder axis is going to be the exact same thing, except it's going to affect your twisting left and right to yaw your ship left and right. I have a bit bigger of a deadband here because, for whatever reason, my twisting on my stick, if I twist it to the left, it sticks there to the left, but not to the right. It's weird, I don't really know why it does that. So I kind of have to have a bit of a bigger deadband there to compensate for that, and which is exactly what it's there for. And again, do not forget to save and apply your profile. And now if we go in-game, we will notice that even without using the Xbox controller, we can still roll left and right. We push it a little bit, it rolls a little. We push it a lot, it rolls a lot. If you set your time scale that you split up to be too big, you may start to notice that whenever you are pushing it just a little, it will kind of roll and then roll a little bit less, then a little more, a little less, a little more, a little less. And that's just a quirk of the way we're doing this. And if you pay really close attention, you can notice it even on the small timescales, but you're going to be focused on much bigger things than that. I don't personally notice it. There is one other thing that I want to do. My C-stick is this little joystick I have on my joystick. I'm going to set clicking it to be the E key. I'm going to set the X-axis to mouse X and the Y-axis to mouse Y, and drop the sensitivity a little bit. This will allow me to navigate menus using my mouse, and then clicking will click E. This just makes playing the game a little bit easier. I can come into the game, open up an inventory, and I can use the stick to move my mouse around, click in it to, well, click E, and then use trigger to left click. And now there are still a couple of things that we have yet to program. At least for me, I have yet to program my my map to anything. So I will set that to M here. And my boost, while it is set to the O keyboard key, nothing is actually triggering that yet. I want the little E button and this switch on my throttle both to trigger the O key. You can click on any of the buttons in the little image, and it will shoot you immediately to the section that you need. We save, we apply, we test, And it works. Now the last thing that we have to account for is that huge dead zone. You remember whenever you were trying to control your ship and you had to move your stick really far forward before it started making a difference. To fix that, we are going to want to very much make sure that our virtual controller is started. Once we have confirmed that, we can go to Controls, Remap Controls, and then Configure Gamepad via Steam. Make sure you are on your Xbox 360 controller, edit it, go to Joysticks, make sure you're in the Flight Controls section. On the left joystick behavior where it says steer, click on the little gear. Make your way down to the Deadzone section, and you'll notice the game just comes with this gigantic dead zone by default. You have to move so far before it actually starts doing anything. In order to fix this, we're going to want to click on Default, set it to Custom. We're going to want to drag, if it'll let me. Come on. Yes, you're going to want to drag the minimum part of the dead zone down. You can still leave a dead zone if you want. I left a 2% dead zone, or you can just get rid of it altogether. This will now allow you to make really fine adjustments without having to move your stick really far. Now we can go into the game, test everything out. You should be able to roll left and right, push the stick forward and back, and twist it. Everything should work. Click the trigger, it should fire. All of the buttons that you've set up should be working. If at any point along this process something hasn't worked, there is a good chance that a computer restart is needed, especially if it's just after having installed something. These things really like to have the computer restarted. That should do it.